OJ.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's in? Who's out?
Comfort is in. Comfort is in.
Just a moment. Okay. What? Oh, where is that? Okay, right. Okay, we're waiting for the other panelists now.
Okay. I'm there. I think I should my video.
Hello. Okay,
Hi.
all right. Bert is in now. Great.
Yeah.
So what that means is that we're waiting for Sarita and Gabriel. They should come in, but I think because the NSS let us in on the dot of 12:45, and I think they're going to cut us out at the dot of time, the exit time. So I think we should really begin.
Yes, we should.
So that hopefully, let me see if I can, hopefully Sarita will be able to, just a moment. Okay, right. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're now starting this webinar. The webinar, as has been advertised, will be presented by 4 presenters. The title of the webinar is From Colonial Subjects to Sovereign Citizens, Knowledge Production in the Language of the Masses. This webinar has been organized by the Edinburgh Circle for the Promotion of African Languages. And the secretary of this circle is one of the presenters, and he will talk a little more about this circle as we go along. So right now, 3 of the presenters are in, and we await the 3rd and 4th presenters. If the joint presentation that is starting first will present for 20 minutes, And the other presenters, the single presenters, will present for 15 minutes each. I think we can now start with the first presentation, which is titled "Why the Use of Indigenous Languages for Higher Education in Nigeria Will Be Inevitable." The paper is jointly presented by myself and Bert van Pinksteren. I am a lecturer in the Department of English of the University of Illinois, while Bert is a researcher with the University of Leiden. So we'll start that presentation. I think since it's a joint presentations, we are both allowed to upload our screens, I believe. In which case, I have shared my screen. I hope everybody can see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right. So, so Bert, I think you're going to start with the introduction. Bert, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So
And I have unmuted, as is always something that happens late during these presentations. So the structure of the talk is on this slide. Let's skip over it quickly. I would like to start by saying a little bit about the Edinburgh Circle on the Promotion of African Languages. It's a circle that was formed at a conference in 1999 in Edinburgh, where a number of people met. Taiwo was one of them, who are all inspired by the ideas of Pra and others who had similar ideas like him, who argued that actually African languages are key to Africans' development. And members of the circle hold the belief that more use of African languages in future in more and more domains is going to be unavoidable. But it does require a certain measure of harmonization and standardization. Next slide, please. So what we have started to do over the past period is organize a monthly series of webinars on applied African linguistics in collaboration with Leiden University. We have been present at several international conferences, lately at the European Conference on African Studies earlier this month in Cologne. And we have been working on a number of book and journal publications. It's an informal circle. The membership is open to all those that are interested. There are no membership fees or whatever. And we have a website. The URL is seen here. We are helped by to move things along by a small steering committee, and in fact, 3 of the members of that steering committee are presenting in this webinar today. Okay, to the next. Let's talk about Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, what exactly is in issue here? We're talking about educating Nigeria's children and about the future of this. And we're talking about the language in which these children are being educated and the effectiveness or otherwise of this language. Most of us are familiar with the sociolinguistic profile of Nigeria, the fact that we are in a diglossic situation where a colonial language has gained ascendancy since the colonial period, and this is English language over and above indigenous languages. The question is whether this is an ideal situation, whether the colonial language will continue to serve, whether it's effective and whether it will continue to serve the interest of the country and of our children or not. There are linguistic and affective issues involved. Those linguistic issues have to do with the effectiveness of languages other than the mother tongue in delivering comprehensive education. And scholars have over time talked about this, the effectiveness of motherhood language education, that is the use of the mother tongue for education of our children as the most effective way. But we have a diglossic language situation where the English language is involved. Now, the mission of the Ministry of Education, which is to use education for fostering development of all Nigerian citizens to their full potentials, is also in issue here. How effective is this to educate all Nigerian citizens to their full potentials using a language that many of them, if not most of them, do not understand? That is the question at stake. And given the current situation, can need be sustained, the current situation where the English language is in use? So when you look at the educational pyramid, here you discover that, well, quite a number of Nigerian children are being educated at the primary school level, some at the lower secondary school and the upper secondary school, but very few at the tertiary level. So most children get at least some primary education, but only about half of them enter secondary education. How sustainable is this? Will this situation increase or will it improve? As you can see, the tertiary education is around 15% more for boys than girls. So there's also a gender issue here. Is language implicated in this issue? When you look at the future, you see the gross enrollment ratio here. This depicts the situation from 1975 to 2000 to 2020, I beg your pardon. And there is also data that indicates what the future projection might be. So when we compare this situation, you can see the enrollment in higher education in some selected countries, including Nigeria. And you can see that Nigeria, the left in green, is quite at the bottom, with South Korea at the topmost echelon with almost 100%. So the question is, what would Nigeria be in the near future? Somewhere in between the UK and South Korea, perhaps. If there's a target, then will the language, English, be sufficient to attain this level of attainment or to attain this level? Or would there need to be a drastic policy change in the language used? What would it mean for medium of instruction if the enrollment were to increase as is expected over time? As you can see, the enrollment estimates for 2050, you can see in blue, when you compare the graphs from the diagrams from left to right, you can see the geometrical increase in the figure for enrollment for higher education when you look at the color blue. And again, the question comes, will the current language of instruction be able to sustain this level as time goes on. So apart from the linguistic issue, which is the issue of competence, the issue of cognitive development, and the affective issue, which is the issue of identity, there's also the question of practicality. Will the English language practically be able to sustain the education of our children by 2050? Bert.
Yeah. So what we see actually in countries around the world is that if participation in tertiary education is low, as it was in my university in Leiden a few hundred years ago, then in fact any language can be used because it is possible to recruit enough clever children who can learn that language. But in fact, if participation in education is high at the levels of that we see in the United Kingdom or in South Korea, or in fact anywhere in the global north, then we find that no education system in the world manages to cling on to a foreign, difficult to learn language as medium of instruction. So in a country like Estonia, a country with only 1.5 million inhabitants, Estonian is the medium of instruction. In Korea, it's Korean in tertiary education. And so it goes on for many other countries. And in fact, in some countries such as Belgium, two local languages are used as medium of instruction. We hold that it is a fiction that Nigeria will be able to use English as the single medium of instruction forever. Holding on to that idea places unrealistic and unsustainable demands on the Nigerian education system that it will never be able to meet. And of course, the problem is worse when you start to think about technical and vocational education and training. So if you start to think about the level of education below tertiary level, because there people will enroll who have on the average lower language abilities in English, and still they have to learn in English. Trying to teach them in English is bound to be wasteful. What we see is that in other countries, for example, also in Morocco, where enrollment is increasing, there is also a gradual shift towards national or indigenous languages as medium of instruction. If that was to happen in Nigeria, if enrollment would triple compared to the current levels, the problem of the medium of instruction also in Nigeria would become urgent. And if we foresee that that is going to happen in 1 or 2 decades, it is better to start planning now. But what people say when I talk about this, what Nigerians say is, but listen, the language ecology in this country is so complicated. How are we going to choose those languages? Or are you going to try and teach in all 500 languages? It's impossible. But how have other countries solved that problem? What we theoretically, the approach that we've used is to try to distinguish between language as discerned and language as designed. This is actually inspired by an old distinction proposed by a German guy, Kloss, who talks about language as differentiated by objective criteria, which he called Abstand languages in his native Germany, and languages as used in a formalized standard way, Ausbau languages. And I propose to use roughly equivalent English terms here: discerned languages versus designed languages. And designed languages are those languages that have been developed, standardized, intellectualized for use in formal domains. The way people speak is very variable. Some people even say we should not think of languages as countable objects. But languages as used in formal domains, in administration, in law, but also in higher education, is bounded, is formalized. And it is even true for English. There is this quote by Trudgill, who holds that only about 3% of all British use their standard received pronunciation of English in their essays when they speak. So the formalized language is different from the spoken languages. And what we see is that in many countries, speakers of several related discerned languages use one designed language for formal purposes. We see that in Estonia, in the Netherlands, in Germany, there are 15 German-like languages spoken in that country, but only one of them is used for formal domains. The same is true in China, in Italy, etc. All these languages are still spoken, but they are not used in formal domains. So what this means is that a related designed language can serve the speakers of a number of discerned languages. And it means, therefore, that also in Nigeria, you would be able to create vastly greater efficiency in the educational systems with fewer than 500 languages.
Okay, right. So
Right.
the situation we have as of now is that it seems unthinkable to use any language other than English. There are various problems, one of which is that there are so many languages. The numbers vary, of course, depending on whether you also count dialects and so on, but numbers are vary from 250 to 500. And there are ethnic issues, there are problems of tribalism and so on. So the question is, how do you tackle some of these problems? And how do you find a practical solution using some of the recipes that other countries have used? Like, for example, employing a designed language that can bring quite a number of languages together. So there are a number of principles that we have talked about. We've talked about principle of choice based on ease of acquisition and learning, principle of equity, inclusivity, and state of development of particular languages. We have also thought about population. When people speak about major languages in Nigeria today, for example, when they speak of Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba, they're talking about those in relative population terms. And so it is being proposed that with a minimum speaker base of 1 million, you can then develop a language for use in tertiary education. The problem, of course, is that when children cannot understand English as much as they should for education, even at post-primary level, how would they understand it for technical use at, in tertiary education? The JAM figures tell us that many people are unable to get into tertiary education, and the Y figures too, because of the problem of language. So the question, therefore, is whether we can develop some of these concepts to look at the problem. For example, the problem of ease of acquisition. If we were to use the example of Cross River State, whose languages, those various languages you can see on your screen, you'll discover that quite a number of languages appear easy, that is those in green. They appear easy for a vast majority of cross-riverians to learn. And so it is possible to bring those languages together and constitute each one into a design or a designed language for the purpose of formal education, especially at the tertiary level. Yoruba is also a very good example. I'm a speaker of Yoruba. My dialect is Siagba in today's Kogi state, but I can, when people in Ijebu are speaking their dialects, I can understand them. These dialects are mutually intelligible, and the various people speaking these various dialects can relate excellently to Yoruba as standard language. So the point therefore is that you can bring all of the Yoruba speaking people together using a standard Yoruba language for higher education, ditto for the various other areas. So we are thinking that 11 languages can be employed, as you can see on your screen, to cover the entire country. Chivi, Biobio, Yoruba, Igbo, Auchi, and so on. Of course, a number of minorities may feel left out, but most of these languages that we have selected are standard languages for many of these other dialects. And so concentrating on them will enable us to design languages for tertiary education. Okay, so some of the languages are already used in educational systems, some in literature, some in lingua franca, in other areas, markets, etc. And so all of this would help to make a rational and acceptable choice. And so what are these rational choices? Well, we build on the linguistic expertise available today in Nigeria, set up expert committees at state and several levels. The question that has to be in the mind of everybody is what the objective is, what the problems of the current situation, what the problems are, and how to solve the problems. So we have to look at the Language Policy Act. There have been some attempts to tinker with the current language policy, though in some states. For example, some years back in Lagos, the governor then, Ambode, made a kind of policy change that would enhance the use of the indigenous language. So we have to prepare for the gradual addition of Nigerian languages as medium of instruction and ensure sufficient training of teachers and so on. Okay, so we believe that, especially because our time is running out, we believe that some of these measures will help us to design indigenous languages for use at the tertiary level of education. That situation seems practical at this point in time, but as we have said, in the future, it's going to become a necessity. Thank you very much. I will not take questions now. Please, we implore audience members to take note of their questions while we take some of the other presentations. We're happy that Professor Gabriel Germani of the University of Chang in Cameroon has joined us now. Thank you very much. Are you ready to take your paper now? Would you rather catch your breath for a while? Professor Germani, are you ready to take your presentation now? Can you hear me? Okay, can you please speak to this? All right, maybe we move on for now to another speaker while gets ready.
Tayo, would it be could I go first? I just landed from Lisbon and I'm catching my next plane in a couple of hours.
Okay, that's okay. Okay,
floor.
that's fine. I'm sure Comfort does not mind. We would not mind that. So we'll just
Let her,
okay.
let her, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we go on to Professor Sarita Henriksen, University of Leipzig, where she is at the moment. Her paper is titled Language Choice in the Post-Colonial University, Insights from Mozambique. Thank you, Professor Henriksen.
Thank you very much, Tayo. Good afternoon. These are perhaps not the best conditions to do a paper presentation, but sometimes when we plan things, there are things that you cannot cancel. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. Can I please share my screen? I have a very brief, a very short presentation that I would like to share with you.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, just give me a minute. Okay. So this is what I intend to share with you this afternoon. My session is language choice in the post-colonial university, insights from Mozambique, where I come from. And maybe I should start by briefly introducing, making a the pedagogical in Mozambique. I was temporarily based in Gießen at the JLU University, but my main home university is the Pedagogical University of Maputo. Mozambique, I believe that some of you might be slightly aware of the linguistic situation of the country, but I thought that I should start by talking very briefly about the linguistic panorama, the linguistic landscape of the country, and briefly discuss the question of language choice at independence and the language education policy at large. I will be talking about the hegemonic position of the Portuguese language in Mozambique, not just in Mozambican society, but also in the education system, and the close association between the Portuguese language as the main and the language of scientific scholarship and publication in the country. And in between, I will talk very briefly about the linguistic imperialism paradigm, because it seems to play a role in the Mozambican context today. And I will end up by reviewing what most of the Mozambican linguists are considering these days that have to do with what language policy would be the most appropriate, the most ideal for our school context. Are you following me?
Yes, certainly.
It's not the best, but we will have to live with this. So talking about the Mozambican linguistic landscape, I should say that it's mostly characterized by high levels of ethno-linguistic and cultural diversity. It's characterized by the coexistence of a multiplicity of languages. In Mozambique, there are over 20 languages spoken, most of them of the Bantu language family. And there is no agreement, in fact, as for the total number of languages spoken in the country, because so far, no dialectological study has been conducted. Some of the languages placed as separate languages are in fact perceived by Mozambicans as dialects of the same language. There has been a study recently conducted by scholars from the Eduardo Mondlane University that say that there are in fact 20 languages in Mozambique. Others say that there are 25. If you read the ethnologue, it refers to about 75 languages spoken in the country. In addition to the Mozambican languages, all of them of Bantu origin, we also see in the Mozambican linguistics landscape the presence of Portuguese and other European languages. We also have the presence of Asian languages, most of them from India, Pakistan, and also from China. I would say that Mozambique is a truly linguistic mosaic. It's a plurilingual and multilingual society, and most individuals are able to function in Portuguese, the official language of the country, plus one or other languages. So the question of language choice in the post-independence period is mostly characterized by the fact that Portuguese was chosen and main language of instruction. In addition to that, in spite of the fact that there are so many languages present in the Mozambican linguistic panorama, Portuguese was adopted as the exclusive language, not only for official business, for the conduction of official businesses, but also the only language of instruction. And that was the case from 1975, the year of independence, until 1993, when we adopted a bilingual education program. So from 1975, the year of conquest of independence, and 1993 was exclusive use of tertiary school system. Well, in this slide, they talk about the hegemonic position of Portuguese in the post-colonial university. What is the picture in today's Mozambican university? What we observe is that the Portuguese language still reigns supreme as the only and the main language of instruction at university. And as such, it enjoys a very high level of prestige and privilege, because it's seen as the only language that opens the doors for Mozambicans to access the good jobs, and also to progress in the social hierarchy and academically. In this slide, I talk about the former colonial language Portuguese and scientific scholarship and publications. And I say that the unassailable and dominant role of Portuguese is also visible in scientific and scholarship publications, where almost no university courses, with very few exceptions, are offered in other language than Portuguese. A majority of Portuguese are exclusively in Portuguese. If you visit Mozambican libraries, Mozambican bookshops, most of the books available are going to be mainly in Portuguese. But the picture is starting to change.
Oh dear, have we lost her? Have we lost her? It looks like we may have lost her for a moment.
She may be coming back.
Let's hope that she comes back on. It was actually precarious because she was just landing at the airport. Was it Lisbon, she said, and had to stay somewhere to do this talk. So trade indulgence of the audience. Let's hang on for a minute or two. If she does not come back on, then Professor Ojumbo will get ready for her own presentation.
Okay, no problem. That's our plight.
Well, it's interesting. It's a bit, but from what she had already said, it's clear that the situation in Mozambique is quite similar to the situations in various previously colonized states of Africa. She was just beginning to talk about what the future might hold when the problem of network struck. Again, let's hope next 30 minutes she's going to come back on. Otherwise, we'll request Professor Yompot to proceed with her paper.
Okay. Thank you. It's so sad that.
Okay, let me just let me just quickly state that Professor Comfort Bayang Ojompok is from the University of Buea in Cameroon. And, her paper is titled "The Place of Indigenous Languages in the Promotion of State Bilingualism / Multiculturalism in Cameroon." Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. I haven't listened to your paper, part of the paper. I think I have to share my screen.
Yeah, please do.
Let's see. Haven't listened to your paper, you and Beth, and then the paper of Sarita, which was going to be very interesting. I count our own losses because the situation is not as yours, and we are still licking our wounds when it comes to the valorization of the languages, let alone talking about teaching them at the tertiary level. Sorry, I'm having problems with sharing.
The green, you see share screen in the middle, the green the green icon with an arrow with the share screen. Can you? Okay. I have a young assistant there.
Yes, there's a young assistant. She's coming. You know.
Can you find it? Click on share screen, and then you will see your own screen, and then you can click on the paper. You can double click on the paper, and then it will show up. Any luck?
Not as yet. Oh, God.
Otherwise, you can just proceed with your paper from your computer, and we'll just be all ears. Hello? Are you there? We can't hear you. We can't hear you anymore, even though you're still on. Okay, are you able to come on now? Yeah. Otherwise, you may just, as I said, okay, you may just oh my. So otherwise, you may just proceed from your, just present from your computer, and then we'll just listen. Can you hear me? Please nod if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Connecting to audio. Okay, Professor Germaine, please stand by just in case. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I can now hear you.
Okay, you can hear me. Right. I was just saying that you should
Yes.
please hold on for a moment while let's hope she'll be able to connect to the audio.
Yeah, a serious problem I'm facing here is a connection that is very unstable.
Okay, her
Yeah.
connection is unstable.
Can you hear me
Yes,
now?
that's the issue.
Okay, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
The problem is that I find it difficult to share my screen. But can you
Well,
hear me?
just, yes, we can hear you. Just present from your computer and we'll just listen.
Sorry about that. So for
No,
us
that's fine.
to approach our paper, we have some key concepts, which are indigenous language, and we know that we have bilingualism and multiculturalism. And as per our paper, we looked at indigenous language as a natural language of a specific region or space or place native to its speakers. And with us here, it is otherwise known, referred to as national, local, native, country talk, language of private realm. And this is attested by Chombo, 2012. And we see that in indigenous languages, in the case of Cameroon, to show you how we are right behind there, people refer to it. It is used specifically for solidarity. It is non-official. It is limited in use. You can't beat that. Now we look at bilingualism because Cameroon is a bilingual country. The bilingualism in Cameroon is that which began as far back as 1960, when the French became official language. French became official language in the French-speaking Cameroon, and English got the same status in English-speaking Cameroon after the independence in 1960. Now, to show you that bilingualism does not regard the indigenous languages. The policy that was implemented at that time aimed at promoting and fostering social integration. And this social integration is very selective. It was in a bid to unite both French and English-speaking Cameroon to the detriment of indigenous language-speaking population. So it speaks for itself that the speakers of indigenous languages are right behind. They are relegated. Now, we take as concerns this bilingualism. In the present day, we had the theme of the 18th edition of National Bilingualism Week in Cameroon for 2023. And it is good for us to look at the theme, which states bilingualism, a window to cultures and technologies, a human capital development tool for the emergence of Cameroon. And you come to think of it, when they talk of a window to cultures and technologies, a human capital development, it is far from that. That kind of development is very exclusive, it's inequitable, like we're going to see further. Now we look at multiculturalism. With the multiculturalism, which we thought was going to be something to salvage the situation, when there was appointment of, there was a commission that was put in place for the promotion of bilingualism and multiculturalism. Now, during this year's bilingualism week, to show you how the bilingualism that is practiced in Cameroon is one-sided, the chairperson emphasized that allocated resources will be used for the effective implementation of programs contained in the 2023 action plan of the Commission, which, amongst other things, will be to ensure the operationalization of their regional offices, promoting bilingualism and social cohesion, as well as combating hate speech in the society. As if that is not enough, the commission, the president of the commission continued and said, another mission bestowed on the institution by the president of the republic is to ensure that administrative documents are produced in the 2 official languages. I want you to take note of 2 official languages by ministries and other state institutions. So from all this, we ask the question, where is the place of the indigenous languages? Of course, your answer is as good as mine, as from all what we have seen from the key concepts of this presentation, indigenous languages have little or no place in the bilingualism, multiculturalism drive in Cameroon. So now we got to go into the introduction of this. We say Cameroon is a Central African country with the most worrisome linguistic situation, because in Cameroon we have 283 languages, which fall amongst 4 language families in Africa. The language situation in Cameroon is really, really preoccupying. For these 286, we looked at Grimes. According to Grimes, they occupy 5% of the world's languages. But again, where is the place of those languages? Now, the languages as Cameroon is made up of a population of about 21 million, belonging to 250 ethnic groups scattered over a surface of 475,442 kilometers square. Now, out of the 286 languages, we have 2 official that we have already mentioned, French and English, which are colonial languages. We have 1 lingua franca, which is the Cameroon Pidgin English, CPE, and the rest of them are 283 indigenous languages. Now, amongst these 283, 7 of them have less than 2,000 speakers, 31 have less than 1,000 speakers, and 6 are said to be nearly extinct, while 54 have no information. Why is it so? It is because of the place of the indigenous languages in Cameroon. Thus, when we looked at this situation, we thought that this could be nothing short of outright genocide, habitat destruction, displacement, demographic submersion, language suppression, and above all, forced assimilation. We see that speakers of indigenous languages in Cameroon, they suffer all these biases. Now, if we go to the linguistic situation of Cameroon further, the socio-economic setup of Cameroon hinges on spatial and linguistic diversities and structures, which do not in any way connote an equitable distribution of functions between the indigenous languages on one hand and the colonial languages on the other. And so we see that these kinds of inequalities, they place the indigenous languages in a very disadvantaged position. They are so depraved, there is lack of prestige, and of course, there is nobody who would, few people who want to align with indigenous languages. And this has been chiefly, as we have mentioned, due to the colonial vestiges that we live with in Cameroon. Now, official Cameroon, we always will joke with it most of the time. We say that because of the situation, we most of the time we will say Cameroon is bilingual, but the people are not bilingual. Cameroon is trilingual, the people are not trilingual. Now, when they talk of bilingualism and multiculturalism, we see that the stress, the emphasis is on these two languages. And so why is it so? It is a very terrible situation for us. Because when I listened very keenly to the first presentation by the two members, we saw that the situation in Nigeria is so different, but it's so different with us in Cameroon. We have had so many efforts that have been made for the languages to come to the limelight, the indigenous languages. As far back as 1966, there is Njok who instituted the linguistic zones with indigenous languages. He thought that by putting languages into zones, people will better embrace the languages. That nothing came good about it. We have Tatajo's situation of the extensive trilingualism in 1975. He tried his best, but nothing good came out of it. Now we even want to rely on the Summer Institute of Linguistics still, who is doing a lot of work. But when we come to the ground, there is just nothing that is happening that you can say, you can actually put your finger on. We have the National Association of Cameroon Language Committees. They had done a great jobs in the domain of indigenous languages. There is nothing that comes in. And that is why there are recent people who have tried to say that there is nothing until schools cease to rely solely on the colonial system as media of instruction and school subjects, there will hardly be basis for any valorization of indigenous languages. Until recently, we carried out some work where we thought at the background of what has been done, we also thought that we should introduce the tier stratification model, which is found
in a moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the role of indigenous languages, just to round up, we say that indigenous languages have low prestige, low economic functions. The law of the Constitution, the law of 1998, simply states that Cameroon languages be taught in schools, but there seems to be no implementation. I mean, little or nothing, very, very little that has been done. So indeed, Cameroon, what we are saying is the bicultural system where English and French reign supreme have continued to kill our indigenous languages, such that we cannot stand up with pride to say this language is taught in this school or is taught in that school. And so this paper looks like trying to recommend that there has to be necessary, it is necessary for us to build the Cameroon nation by introducing the indigenous languages in all aspects, both the public and private realms of life in the country. And we also look at the attitudes of stakeholders, which we think their mindsets must change, because in other places, mindsets have changed, but with us, we remain the same. I mean, we are not making any progress. The wholesome participation of a people in a nation state like Cameroon can only be ensured when both the indigenous people and the elite are given the opportunity to benefit from goods and services delivered through their respective languages. And that can only be possible if certain factors like adequately introducing indigenous languages in the public sphere with a language policy that favors the valorization of indigenous languages is properly checked by as well as a legal framework. So that is what we try to look at by trying to ascertain the position of indigenous languages in Cameroon.
Thank you very much.
Nkubwenko ti menkagan tonto Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll quickly invite Professor Gabriel Germani. His talk is titled New Linguistic Imperialism as Barriers to Language Use in Key Domains in Africa, a Decolonial Perspective. Professor Germani. Yes, Professor Germani, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Let
Okay,
me look
yeah,
for
please
my
proceed. I hope you
presentation.
can make your paper in 10, 12 minutes. Thank
Okay,
you.
10, 12 minutes. That's a challenge.
10 minutes. Yes, a
It's
challenge.
challenging.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much and welcome to all panel members. So my presentation is titled New Linguistic Imperialism as Barriers to Language Use in Key Domains in Africa, a Decolonial Perspective. I don't know what's, okay, a decolonial perspective. So I hope
Yes, your slides are on. Please
I
proceed.
hope you are getting my screen.
Yes, we're getting it.
Do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Hello?
We can see it. Can you hear us?
Okay. So, okay, thank you. So presentation first. So, well, I have to mention that my internet, he can hear you, but I'm actually wondering if you are not hearing me.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
So the work unfolds, the presentation unfolds as follows. I will begin by presenting.
Now we can't hear you anymore. Please go on. We can see you. And
So as I mentioned earlier, yes, as I mentioned earlier, my internet is very, very hot. The work unfolds, the presentation unfolds as follows. I begin by presenting some background information on linguistic imperialism. Are you getting me?
Yes.
Then we'll discuss what decoloniality is, and then after that we'll present language key domains, key domains in language, and afterwards we will focus on the manifestation of new linguistic imperialism. And after that point, we will make some concluding remarks. I don't know what's going on here. Some linguistic imperialism background information. So the word comes from Latin imperium and means control by a dominant group or power.
Okay. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh, dear. Your internet is fluctuating so badly. Can you hear us? Can you hear us? Oh, dear, we can't hear you.
Covers military, political, and economic control.
Maybe you should mute your video. Maybe that will increase the power of your network. Can you mute your video? Okay, well, so yes, I think we may certainly have to, but he does not seem to be able to hear us. Can you? Can the technical people? Can the technical people do something about that? Can the technical people? Sorry?
Do about that. Connection is stable here, it's very stable. So I think the connection is not good for people online, but here connection is good.
Okay. So can you then stop him?
No,
technically? Can you stop him technically?
I don't, there's nothing we can do about it, sir. It's about connection issue from his own end, sir. It's about his connection. So maybe he can just log out and log in. I think that would be the best thing. You can log out and then.
But he can't hear us. That's the problem. He can't hear us.
Maybe you should go to the next take the next presentation because time is going.
Yes, but how do we remove the
is the one
shared screen?
Is the one that can remove it. Is the only one that can
remove the shared screen.
Yeah, we cannot remove it. Is the only one. Is the only one,
okay.
Unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Gabriel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, it seems we are not getting you at all, so we may have to step down your paper, please. So can you please remove the screen sharing, and then so we can move to the next paper, and then we can take questions and discussions. Sorry about that. So have you done that? Okay, I think so. Well, sorry about this technical issues. It's one of the problems that we're encountering in Africa. Okay, but I'll go on to the next paper, which is titled Multilingualism, Semilingualism, Decolonialism, and Indigenous Language Policy in the African context. I will share my screen and I'll run rapidly through the slides so that we can have some time for the discussion. I hope everybody can see my screen now.
Yeah, you have 5 on 5.
Oh dear. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, 5 on 5.
Okay, good. I'm trying to place this on slideshow. Okay, good. So, taking the title, I'll just take some 5 or 3 minutes to run through this if I can. And well, the background is about language and development, and then multilingualism in education. Then the terms lingualisms, when we hear these lingualisms, they indicate the scope of language acquisition and acquisition modalities. They also implicate levels of proficiency and therefore the potential for personal and social development. Negative acquisition states, that is, these isms with negative connotations, the focus of pedagogy and policy. For example, terms like monolingual or bilingual incompetence, semi-competence, and semi-lingualism. So what I want to quickly do is to see how these concepts relate to the Nigerian African polity. Controversial term, semi-lingualism. It's a controversial term, whether it's applicable to the Nigerian context, and the role of language policy in all of that. Let's quickly look at the controversies. Well, when we talk about language and development, there's hardly any controversy. Language is seen as social capital. And so acquisition modalities and the scope of acquisitions are critical for personal and self-development. The more competent, the better your prospect of personal and social development. Multilingualism in education, the problem here is to know whether it enhances or disrupts the ideal acquisition of languages on the one hand, or whether it advances or retards educational process on the other hand. Opinion is divided on this, and hopefully I'll be able to come back to that. So some of the problems have to do with classification. Who is a bilingual? Look at yourself. Consider yourself, for example, as an educated Nigerian or Cameroonian or somewhere from the Netherlands listening to this. Am I a bilingual? If I'm a bilingual, who really am I? Or am I a semilingual? As we shall see, this is a term that cannot be overemphasized. And then, is the problem applicable to the Nigerian situation? What does it matter anyway? And then, what are the related policies? How effective are these policies? Okay, bilingualism, multilingualism, these terms are sometimes used interchangeably to refer to speakers of two languages. They could be social or individual, but how much and how well, that has been an issue in controversy. So there are terms that depict levels of competence or proficiency, for example, whether you're a compound bilingual or a coordinate bilingual or a balanced bilingual. And there are terms that depict levels of incompetence, whether you're incipient or subcoordinate or semi-competent or semi-lingual. Again, we'll come to that point of semi-lingualism. There are also cognate and disparate levels of incompetence. For example, when we relate subtractive bilingualism to semi-lingualism. Again, I'll come to those, but let's focus on semi-lingualism for a while. Let's focus on semi-lingualism for a while. It has been used as a term that depicts half knowledge or less than complete linguistic skills in first and second languages. Does that describe you? Does that describe any Nigerian that you know? Is this term applicable? That's the question that we are looking to answer. And I have described semi-lingualism following these previous commentaries as a state of simultaneous incompetence in both or all the languages that constitute the linguistic repertoire of the bilingual or the multilingual. Now, how precise is this concept? For example, what level of competence is required for you to be able to classify yourself as a bilingual? Is it native language, for example, in each of the languages, or just some getting by competence in the language? Conversely, or on the other hand, what level of competence, incompetence equals what we call semi-lingualism? Are we going to be right to call semi-lingual? What are the features? And these are some of the things that we want to look at and how applicable these are to the Nigerian situation. We make the point that semi-lingualism manifests as features of language incompetence. And within the Nigerian society, these there are quite a number of features of use of language that can actually qualify us to refer to many Nigerians as semilingual. First of all, there's lack of numeracy and or literacy in the indigenous language of first acquisition. In this case, Yoruba, for example, many Yoruba people, whether educated or not, are unable to count accurately up to 100 or read or write fluently in Yoruba. So what that may mean is that you don't have native life competence in your so-called mother tongue, and you're on your way. I mean, since it's half knowledge that you have, you're on your way to being classified as a semilingual. Lack of knowledge or awareness of common indigenous Yoruba lexis, what you call lexical, the problem of lexical access in the spoken Yoruba of the Yoruba English bilingual. Compulsive, that is involuntary and excessive code mixing or language mixing. This has often been ascribed to incompetence in the language. And I'm going to make a certain distinction here between in types of code mixing. Making a distinction between purposive and compulsive code mixing. Purposive code mixing is when you purposively, deliberately, consciously insert some words for one purpose or the other in the string of one language. You insert the words or terms of another language, and compulsive involuntary is when you don't even know, you can't even stop yourself. And it's often a sign of incompetence in that language when you have to, because of problem of lexical access, you have to insert new words. So there is also simultaneous inadequacy of communicative input in English as a second language. Of course, many people, including university students, do not have the kind of facility with the English language that you have, maybe as a lecturer and so on. But several students at various levels, despite the investment on English as the second language, are actually incompetent in the second language English. So when these two values come together, that is lack of competence in your so-called mother tongue and simultaneous lack of competence in English language, then obviously you are a semilingual. When you cannot count in your language, you cannot construct a sentence in your language, and you're not very fluent in English either, then you're a semilingual. Well, I'm going to skip this. We know that this a result of colonial policy. Unfortunately, in post-colonial policies have also failed. That is, by independent governments have failed to address this situation. Now, let's not be confused. Semilingualism is not the same thing as code mixing or code switching. As I said, there is this distinction that I have drawn between purposive code switching and compulsive code switching, where you can't help yourself because you're not so competent, you have to compulsively code switch, or because there is the incidence of language loss, and you cannot but use language to fill in. Two things are happening. You are becoming semilingual, and two, your language is also losing out in the process. I've distinguished between the pre-colonial and the colonial and post-colonial situations here, where you have negative language attitudes and so on. But in the past, when you talk about multilingualism, the other languages they function as languages of access, whereas the situation of compulsive semilingualism creates creates multilingualism as a language of process, where everything is just mixed together and disrupts the comprehension and competence in the languages. So you have negative effects, including inferiority complex, lack of confidence, and so on and so forth. These are part of the package of semilingualism. Let me quickly conclude that semilingualism is a linguistic reality of many African states, and it's particularly prominent in Nigeria, which is the most populous African country. The need to strengthen policy to address distortions in the acquisition process resulting from unstructured input cannot be overemphasized. So in rethinking the issue of language and development, African nations must develop and utilize their languages for all purposes. Policy can and must tinker with and adjust the current sociolinguistic profile of African nations in favor of African languages. I'll stop there. We've spent so much time. Many of the concepts that we have used are controversial, and we hope that we'll be able to attend to some of the questions that you have for some of the speakers. So we'll ask the audience to intervene at this point by asking questions of particular speakers or of all the speakers in general. Right now, we have less than 10 minutes to do all of this. We are sorry for the time lost due to technical problems. I can see that Professor Erickson is back, but our time is spent. So questions, please. Questions, comments, contributions over the next 10 minutes. I don't know if those online are also allowed to ask questions.
I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
First question. The first question, and it's also a form of Professor Comfort on indigenous, the situation of indigenous language. I want to suggest that the journey of a lifetime has just a step. If a policy had been introduced in 1956, indigenous language, and one way or the other, the policy has not been implemented, and it has not been follow-up policy, realization policy. That means there are lots of things done by the language experts in Cameroon. For instance, there could be introduction as part of the implementation. There could be introduction of indigenous language and experimentation in a big pilot school. So how such would be looked at to enhance learning, acquisition, knowledge. So if this is done, it will be like a test. And from there, subsequent implementation take place. That's the suggestion. Then also, the presenter of the said languages used in tertiary institution, higher education. Looking at this Nigerian situation, it's difficult. Prof has listed a number of issues like ethnic, tribalism, and all that. What is the situation of pidgin language? Is it possible to upgrade pidgin language to a language that will be used in higher education? Thank you.
Okay. So other questions? Maybe we take them all. Any other questions? Professor Jean Paul, there's a question for you, and Dr. Van Pixteren, there's a question for you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, Professor Jean Paul, then for now.
Could you just rephrase it, because I couldn't get her so well. I know she was talking about policy. I didn't get it. Could you please rephrase it? Let me get the question, please.
That's a question directed to the speaker from Cameroon.
Yes.
About the implementation process that due to the fact that a policy had been introduced, had been pronounced since 1956, and it was not properly implemented to affect the status of indigenous language Cameroon. That means there are lots of work to be done by the languages Cameroon. So I suggested a pilot. I suggested the implementation of the use of indigenous language to see probably at a level to show its efficiency in enhancing acquisition of knowledge. So after this is done, now be used as a starting point for implementing that policy. And also,
okay, thank you. Thank you.
A counter policy has not been made, meaning that the implementation towards that same policy will still be achieved.
Okay, thank you. 1 minute, please.
The suggestion.
It sounds like a suggestion, but I want to say that so many pilot projects, like I enumerated, had been carried out. And even when they are carried out, like the Properca project, which proved very well that it was an experimental project, which proved that students who are taught in the indigenous languages were better performed than those taught in English. It was the research results were published, but again, nothing concretely is on the ground.
Okay.
And that is why we keep all of these things on and on. The languages were even introduced into a Colonial tertiary. The Colonial is a school that trains teachers. But if you go there, you discover that nothing concretely is happening.
Thank
because
you.
It's yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Van Pixteren, your question. 1 minute, please.
I also could not quite catch the question.
Okay,
Could you repeat
quickly.
it?
What was the question again?
Or was it about the position of pidgin?
Of the issue of the said language for higher education in Nigeria.
Is the viability of indigenous languages education?
Looking at the circumstance, there is the problem of ethnicity, tribalism, and some other genres of Nigeria. How do we do that in Nigeria? That's one. Two, is it possible to standardize pidgin language, serve that purpose?
Yeah.
Nigeria,
okay. Yes, I get it. I get it. Thank you. Okay, about the first question, how to deal with ethnicity and tribalism and rivalries, don't look at the European to solve that. You will have to solve that among yourselves. But of course, continuing with the present situation is going to be unsustainable. You will not be able to give all the Nigerians who need education the education they deserve if you continue on the present path. So one way or another, you will have to deal with that problem. Of course, there is the example of Tanzania, where Swahili was chosen because it is not a majority language in the country and it was acceptable to many others. Now, for Pidgin, in theory, it would be possible, of course, to standardize Pidgin and to make it, let's say, a separate language of its own from English and to use it in formal domains. However, we doubt, when we were talking about this with Professor Olorontubo and myself, we doubted whether this would be a feasible option because the strength of Pidgin at the moment is that it is not formalized. That means that people who have Yoruba as their mother tongue can use a Yoruba type Pidgin, and Igbo speakers will have an Igbo type Pidgin. Now, if you standardize, it means that you will have to make choices between what kind of Pidgin you will make standard, and that means that you will make it more difficult for speakers of other languages or with different language backgrounds to learn that Pidgin. And if it becomes more and more difficult to learn that standard Pidgin, then people will say, listen, why do you force me to learn standard Pidgin if with the same amount of effort I can also learn standard English, which gets me further? So I think in the end, I doubt if Pidgin will be the solution. But again, you will have to sort it out among yourselves as Nigerians.
Yeah, thank you very much. I suspected that you were going to say that. Yes, and this is one of the ways of beginning to solve the problems when we place it in the public sphere and people intervene from various quarters. We thank everybody for participating in this program. If you look at the program, you'll find the website, or at least the website of the Edinburgh Circle for the Promotion of Indigenous African Languages. So you can and you're welcome to join the circle. You also find the emails of participants, and you're welcome to write to them to continue the conversation. Always remember that language is the key to development. And we have to stop being elitist and thinking about the future. So sooner or later, you'll have to return to your indigenous languages, and the time to start is now. So we want to thank all the speakers, Dr. Bert Van Picturing, Professor Ben Ojompot, Professor Sarita Erickson, and Professor Gabriel Gemini. Thank you very much for contributing to this seminar, and we'll see all of you again sometime in the hopefully. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.